This episode is sponsored by the IoT job site, the world's only dedicated space for applying for and advertising IoT vacancies across the world. Register now for job alerts or get in touch via let's talk at theiotjobsite.com.
Welcome to the IoT podcast show. I'm your host, Tom White. Before we start the episode, as always, please like, comment and subscribe to hear the latest updates on the show. Today we are joined by Dominikus Hierl. Dominic is the Vice President of EMEA Sales at Quectel. Quectel is a wireless solutions business creating cellular IoT modules and antennas. Dominic, welcome to the IoT podcast show.
Hi Tom, thanks for having me today.
It's a real pleasure, eager to get you on to the show and fascinated to talk about Quectel. For our listeners that may not understand the business and certainly your background, Dominic, could you give us a sentence or two on how you got into this crazy industry we're involved in?
Thank you. So Tom, I had an engineering function and then I joined my first junior sales position in the IoT industry in 1998.
Wow.
In Siemens, which versus it was called machine-to-machine communication. So that's an ancient term for IoT, and it was a little appendix of the mobile phone division. And we start doing then IoT applications back in the 90s based on the cell phone technology, which were large and clumsy and very expensive modules. But it was a big success already in the early 2000s by enabling Chinese handset makers. That's 20 plus years ago. And so we established that in Siemens for automotive and many other clients with growth rates nobody ever has seen in a very large company like Siemens. Then I joined an Israeli-Italian startup called Telit, which was then after a few years become very prominent as the global market leader for IoT modules. And as time goes on, I joined a Chinese company, Quectel Wireless, which has become a leading module maker in the industry with a very significant growth. And I'm managing now the sales in Europe as Senior Vice President Sales EMEA.
Fantastic. I mean, when we have people on the show, they either talk about IoT or M2M. When they talk about M2M, we know that they've been in the industry for some time. So that's fantastic to hear. But it seems as though you've come from a technical background more into a sales position than Dominic in recent years. Why did you decide to do that?
Yeah, I studied electrical engineering with an emphasis on digital electronics as well as industrial engineering. So since I was not a very passionate programmer because I'm lacking a little bit the patience, it turned out for me that I'm more looking for a commercial function in a company, and you start then in a junior sales, more technical sales position. My first job actually was with Rode and Schwarz, which is a very world famous company for test and measurement equipment. We did analog radio systems, and even in those analog systems in the mid 90s, we already did vehicle tracking via clumsy 1200 baud modems. But that was very interesting already. And then, with the arrival of this more reasonable and compact cell phone technology, we then started to deploy 2G first. Even GPRS data service was not ready yet. It was in the year 2000. So I was witnessing the whole evolution of 2G technology towards 3G, which was a big game changer, bringing real bandwidth to application, enabling new bandwidth, with a new bandwidth enabling many new applications like routers and modems, video surveillance and so on. We saw then the verge of LTE technology, and I think that pretty much takes us to our topic today, what 5G will do then for cellular IoT applications, because of course that's a key question for our talk today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And just a little bit more about Quectel. So you gave a brief introduction there. What is Quectel famous for today for some of our listeners that may not know, Dominic?
Quectel is a very young company, 10 years plus. Nevertheless, we were able to gain a leading market share in Europe, the world totally, and in China, which is a market not so visible to us, but showing enormous growth at this point. So it's a combination of a very technical customer-oriented company with a huge emphasis on technical support and an enormously large product portfolio, very good product price, a very efficient company, which has allowed us to continuously gain market share in a way that I call them the historical incumbent providers, like a few of my previous employers, had huge problem to follow that pace. It's a very interesting Chinese growth story, I have to say. And of course, here on all ends of the all ends of the world, we have a very seasoned, passionate, professional senior leadership team, all people with a background from Jamal Totales, Telit, Sierra Wireless, Simcom. And so it's a combination of a very young, very, very hard-working team in China, which is preparing the foundations then for our international sales success.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think one of the main things that we want to discover here today is clearly around connectivity and the digital infrastructure. So connectivity is at the premise of building the smarter world, and obviously 5G has been highly spoken about in terms of its technology and what it can enable for the fourth industrial revolution, such as smart cities, etc. Where is 5G in terms of its rollout and what it can do for IoT devices, in your opinion?
It has two sides, two flip sides of the coin. One is a long-term evolution scenario for the big majority of low bandwidth applications, which were previously running on 2G or 3G. Now we see a huge wave of network sunset, mainly on 3G in Europe today, but 2G is on the horizon towards the mid-20s. So our customers, industrial system integrators, are looking for solutions which can stay in the market 5 to 10 years. So it's clear that they need something new to supersede 2G and 3G technology. Now we have the LPWA technology, narrowband IoT, and category M1 LTE. So what does it have in common with 5G? Those are network evolutions of release 13 and 14 of the network infrastructure, which are fully integrated in the 5G, broader 5G scenario, plus adding new features of 5G like ultra high reliability, ultra low latency, which is opening many new application fields. On the other side, the enormous bandwidth of 5G is opening totally new market segments in terms of augmented reality, drones, robotic, and let's discuss a little bit later about many more details about that, all into a full connected industrial IoT 4.0 scenario. So all operators of large factories, for example, all big car conglomerates, car companies are already working on full 5G deployment on premise and also in the public network to fully to make the whole production scenario totally wireless. So that's the two aspects. Of course, we are also serving a consumer segment, which is very, very important and a very interesting part of our business, which are 4 and 5G routers for small office, home office, for residential user application. So that's a super successful, super important market segment for us. Also a big driver for the mobile carrier, because as with any new technology, 5G is a cost driver, both on the infrastructure side, also on the handset side. It's a very important new development for the carriers. The 4G network was still based on the old switching and infrastructure of 2G and 3G. So for them, it's very important to go now to a all IP infrastructure, which is consistent. Basically, for the very large carriers which own fixed and mobile networks, there will be a total convergence of network. All the old circuit switch domains will be switched off and removed, generating lots of cost in operation and maintenance. And so that's many motivators for the carriers now to invest into a 5G network upgrade, and then gradually merge the 4G elements into this 5G scenario, and this is including also completely all IoT segments.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for that overview. I mean, we've had many people on the show talking about 5G being the superhighway compared to the the A road that was 4G, yeah, and the sheer amount of data that's being connected from IoT sensors and enabling that traffic. Is it all about speed, Dominic? Is this what the main benefit to 5G is, in your opinion?
Yeah, first of all, the current networks are reaching their limits in terms of massive deployment. So that's the beauty of then LPWA technology. One node can hold hundreds of thousands of IoT sensors. And we saw it in Italy. They had a very dense deployment of gas meters. And having hundreds of gas meters in one cellular cell was really bringing big capacity problems to the signaling channels and to the system. So it was unavoidable to upgrade now the infrastructure with a new technology. So it's a matter of mass deployment of the number of points. It's a very big problem, a very big issue also of traffic capacity. So it's also the motivation to reuse the 2.1 gigahertz band 5, which was the initial 3G band, which is a nice chunk of spectrum to reform and allocate it to 5G in order to increase network capacity significantly. And latency was a very big problem in the current scenario. Even with the LTE Advanced, LTE Pro, you can transmit up to 2 gigabit downstream. The problem is that the switching infrastructure having 100 millisecond packet delay. So it's like a very strong car with very narrow wheels. So all of that is changing now with the full deployment of 5G. So we will see ideally 1 millisecond packet delay time, which will bring an immersive immediate user experience, which is very important now for all those new applications like real-time gaming, many other issues. The previous delay times of the network did not allow for a super immersive user experience. So this is one of the network features dramatically changing the usability of the network. So and then there is many professional applications like real-time video streams into emergency vehicles. Many businesses will be totally revolutionized by displacing or connecting operators on a remote basis, even for heavy machinery, construction machine. Everything can be run then in a virtual way from a centralized operating center from the physical remote location.
And thank you for that. And when will we see this mass expansion of 5G, and what would this enable for IoT devices? Because in the UK specifically, there's been a lot of talk about the increased need for masts, right? 10 times more masts to enable 5G to be carried in the way that it's intended. Is this a blocker in your view about the expansion, the physical need to actually put up more masts in local cities, etc.? And is this perhaps one of the reasons why the rollout has been a little bit slower than we originally envisioned it might be?
No, I believe, in rural scenarios, in urban scenarios, in cities, there is a huge necessity to increase their viable network capacity. We all have seen that the data usage is exploding. It's manifold. people are streaming a lot of video streaming, and this is certainly requiring a huge bandwidth from the network. Spectrum is still rare, so we very urgently need to leverage the additional spectrum coming from the 5G auctions in the 3, in the 5 gigahertz range, and the millimeter wave in the 28, 38 gigahertz. This is opening huge bandwidth channels, and there is many, again, the customer usage gets very video orientated, and that will drive network capacity a lot. Furthermore, we have many applications. It's mainly the autonomous driving application, which is very high on the priority list of the car companies, the OEMs, and an autonomously driving car over a certain level of autonomy, which has been standardized by SAE in 1 to 5 levels, and for level 4 and 5, it's absolutely mandatory to have a highly available real-time connectivity to this vehicle. If you think about the complex traffic situations, the level of local artificial intelligence in the car will, for the foreseeable future, where we talk about 5, 10, maybe 15 years, will not be sufficient in all traffic conditions to allow operating the car to operate autonomously. So there will be a significant number of operators in the back end and manage situation where the full autonomous car will not be able to properly orientate. And that's only one example which will totally mandate then a very good coverage of 5G on a nationwide level.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great use case there that you've mentioned around autonomous driving. We've had people in the past on the show talking about some of the limitations, but also clearly the benefits from level 1 to level 5 or autonomy of driving. What other use cases are there that Quectel's technology is currently supporting, and where do you see them thriving in the future?
There is again in the area of industrial automation, there will be many new applications. Like again, delivery drones is one very good example. We also see the module, the 5G module, will incorporate lots of artificial intelligence. For example, you could do video surveillance on a camera where you feed a video stream to a backend system which is analyzing all the number plates. The same way, you could do the picture analysis in our module and you only stream number plate content. So you go from a 2 megabit per second data stream to maybe 50 or 100K only. So that's one very good example how artificial intelligence will revolutionize then the IoT application in a 5G scenario. So the intelligence will move from the backend to the edge of the device. So the IoT edge device, which was basically some sensors and a communication engine, is moving to an artificial intelligence device. So that's very interesting for us because the technology tends to become cheaper and cheaper, and for us it will be much more interesting and attractive than to sell more comprehensive silicon. And then again, it's getting a software game, of course, as well.
And in terms of IoT, we talk about everything being connected. Industry 4.0, the fourth industrial revolution, the fact that there's an almost limitless amount of use cases. I'd be interested to know from your view, Dominic, about what industries are becoming more connected and perhaps ones that we didn't think would be connected in the way that they are becoming today.
I think what is very catchy is a complex situation like an oil rig in the North Sea shore, like a big forestry work, like a big copper mine in the middle of nowhere, and that's really happening as we speak. So those scenarios, those properties will first benefit from standalone 5G networks. They can be closed networks with a very high level of data security. And then the whole logistics, production, equipment scenario will be fully connected in real time via 5G networks. And I'm quite sure that this will be one of the industrial scenarios. If you look to a totally different industry like video broadcasting, and I just saw the Olympics, they put video cameras, HD video cameras on any boat of a race. And I think this is pretty much implemented by 5G technology. So many industries like video productions for broadcasting stations, where it was a big hassle, you come with a transmission car, you have to build up your paid satellite lines, which are expensive and clumsy. You need operators in the back end and 5-10 people on site for all the equipment. You just have a very compact device, a camera, maybe one guy for the audio, and then you can do 4K real-time video streaming from the site right away and broadcast it. And if you think about it, that saves so much cost and hassle and issues, and it's real time. So that's certainly one of the very next 5G scenarios as networks are brought out in the markets.
Yeah, it's interesting you should mention at the start of that the oil rig use case, because we had someone on the show in the past, their company Roxol, that were talking about IoT solutions in the oil industry. You'd have to check it out at another time. It's really interesting how they're implementing that and the technology behind it. But I think you're 100% right. We had the capability to record from a video standpoint in 4K. And on hardware, right? You pick up an iPhone these days, you can do it at 60 frames a second, but how are you going to get that across to a central server or up into the cloud or what have you without the use of 5G? And I think that's a real prominent use case there, especially with the Olympics. There's been some fantastic initiatives that have been going on recently, and a lot of stressed out video companies trying to make sure that the systems are running in order to get this going. But thank you so much for sharing that.
Go ahead.
No, please.
No, incidentally, I was talking to a guy who is the architect of the video transmission on Tour de France.
Okay.
So what they need 2 helicopters and one jet airplane, which is cruising at 10,000 meters to transmit all the stuff away. So think about it, that's an enormous budget. I don't exactly what it is, but if you could do everything on ground, just right from the spot, it's so much easier, so much quicker, and it will pretty much also drive then content creation. And that's a key issue: how to generate high quality content at low cost for the broadcasting industry.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I think there's so many different use cases, let alone in broadcast, and elsewhere that this is really enabling. I think one of the things that I'm really curious on, and I know people listening and watching this podcast will be, is where you see connectivity going, certainly within the next decade. People are talking about 6G. We've barely rolled out 5G. 6G is already in people's minds. What does that mean for IoT in particular, in your opinion, Dominic?
No, it will be a continuous improvement of the performance level of the network. So the quality of what we do, video resolution, is constantly increasing. And without the additional spectrum of real 5G deployment, which means leverage of all the defined bands, leveraging the capacity of the network and the new features like super high reliability and latency, then the demand for more capacity will increase. And this is what 6G will be about, is opening again totally new levels of spectrum, even, again, another 1,000 times higher data transmission speed, whichever applications this might require in the next future. But as we've seen it's accelerating. We are in the middle of the IoT revolution, of the digital revolution, of the business model. Again, I'm very long time in this, and it's really, really going in an exponential way how technology is being deployed and adopted, and this is driving demand to a very, very interesting level.
Yeah, absolutely. And clearly Quectel are at the forefront of this in terms of the technology, the services and the products that you're offering. Dominic, it's been absolutely fantastic to have you on the show today. I've really appreciated some of your insights here. Clearly very well versed in IoT and connectivity. Been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on to the IoT podcast show.
Tom, thanks so much for having me today. Bye-bye.
As always, guys, if you'd like to find out more about Dominic, our guest today, please go to quectel.com, have a look on LinkedIn and see what all the fuss is about. Get involved in the comments, share, like, subscribe, and all that other good stuff. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.